The night Duke Alistair Vane's fever broke 104 degrees. His entire household abandoned him to die alone. His wife locked herself 3 floors away. His sons fled to the country estate. Servants whispered about contagion and drew lots to see who'd remove his body when the time came. Only one person stayed, Eliza Rowan, a maid who'd scrubbed his floors for 2 years without him knowing her name. What happened in that sick room over the next 9 days would destroy his family, shatter every rule of their world, and prove that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to walk away. If you want to see how one fearless choice rewrote everything, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The first sign that Duke Alistair Vane was dying came at 11:47 on a Tuesday night, when his valet found him collapsed on the marble floor of his study, convulsing. By midnight, the house physician had been summoned. By 12:30, he delivered his verdict in the hushed tones reserved for tragedy among the elite. Inflammatory fever of unknown origin, likely contagious, possibly fatal. The words spread through Vane Manor like smoke, servants clustering in doorways, whispering behind their hands, calculating their odds. By 1 a.m., the evacuation had begun. Lady Catherine Vane, the Duke's wife of 23 years, was the first to retreat. She stood in the doorway of the master bedroom, staring at her husband's shaking form with the same expression she might give a rabid dog. "Move him to the east wing," she said, voice flat. "Seal the corridor. I won't risk the children." "Madam, His Grace specifically requested—" "I don't care what he requested." Catherine's jaw tightened. "My sons come first. Always." She turned without another word, heels clicking down the hallway toward her private chambers. Within the hour, she'd locked herself in with her ladies-in-waiting, ordering meals left outside the door. No one in, no one out. Quarantine by choice. The Duke's sons were next. Edward, the eldest, 21, handsome, useless, didn't even pretend concern. "Father's survived worse," he said, already calling for his carriage. "I'll be at Blackwell House if anyone needs me," which they won't. His brother Thomas at least had the decency to look guilty. "What if he asks for us?" "Then someone will write." Edward shrugged into his coat. "I'm not dying because the old man caught something from one of his tenant visits. You coming or staying?" Thomas hesitated for exactly 4 seconds. Then he followed his brother out into the night. By dawn, the manor had emptied like a sinking ship. 37 staff members, 3 family members, countless hangers-on, all found urgent business elsewhere. Cook claimed a sick sister in Dover. The head butler remembered a critical matter in London. Even the stable boys made excuses, leaving horses unfed. Only the housekeeper remained out of obligation, and she kept to her office with a vinegar-soaked cloth pressed to her face. And then there was Eliza. She'd been standing in the servants' corridor when the housekeeper made the announcement. Any staff choosing to stay would receive double wages and a signed letter of reference should they survive. Any staff choosing to leave would face no consequences. The room emptied in under 3 minutes. Eliza stayed in the doorway, watching them go. Watched Mary grab her shawl without a backward glance. Watched Peter, who'd worked at the manor for 15 years, practically sprint toward the servants' exit. Watched every single person she'd worked alongside choose themselves. She couldn't exactly blame them, but she couldn't exactly join them either. "You're still here." Mrs. Hewitt, the housekeeper, looked surprised, almost suspicious. "Why?" Eliza didn't have a good answer, at least not one that made sense when she said it out loud. "Someone should be," was all she managed. Mrs. Hewitt studied her for a long moment, this small, plain girl with rough hands and eyes too steady for someone so young. 23 years old, brown hair always scraped back, face forgettable in every way except one. She didn't look away when you stared at her. "You understand what you're risking?" "Yes, ma'am." "The fever could spread. You could die." "I know." "No one would think less of you for leaving, including His Grace." Eliza almost smiled at that. His Grace didn't think of her at all. She was furniture, a shadow that changed his linens and emptied his chamber pot and became invisible the moment she left a room. "I'm staying," she said quietly. Mrs. Hewitt sighed, like she'd expected this and dreaded it in equal measure. "Then you'll be the one to tend him. I'll manage supplies and coordination, but I'm not setting foot in that room. Understood?" "Yes, ma'am." "Boil everything. Burn the soiled linens. Keep the windows closed. Night air spreads sickness. And Eliza? Ma'am? If he worsens beyond hope, don't let him suffer. There's laudanum in the medicine cabinet. Enough. The implication hung in the air like wet smoke. I understand, Eliza said. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she prepared. Hauled water, gathered clean linens, found every jar of willow bark extract in the still room and lined them up like soldiers. She read the physician's notes twice, useless platitudes about humors and miasmas, then ignored them entirely. Her grandmother had been a midwife in Kent. Eliza remembered enough. Cool water for the fever, willow bark for pain, broth if he could swallow, prayer if he couldn't, though she'd keep the last part to herself. At 6 a.m., she pushed open the door to the east wing chamber where they'd moved him. The smell hit her first, sweat and sickness, sharp and sour. Then the sound, labored breathing, rattling in his chest like stones in a tin cup. The Duke lay in the center of an enormous four-poster bed, looking small for the first time in his life. Alistair Vane had always been a presence. Tall, broad-shouldered, the kind of man who filled rooms just by existing. Dark hair going silver at the temples, sharp jaw, eyes that could strip paint off walls when he was angry. He'd built his reputation on control, over his lands, his people, his world. Now he looked like something broken. His skin was gray, fever-wet. His hair stuck to his forehead in dark streaks, and his eyes, when they opened, didn't seem to see anything. Water, he rasped. Please. Eliza moved quickly, pouring from the pitcher she'd brought. She slid her arm under his shoulders, lifting carefully. He was burning up, skin so hot it almost hurt to touch. Drink slowly, Your Grace. He managed 3 swallows before collapsing back, exhausted. For a moment, his eyes focused on her face. You're still here? Yes, sir. Everyone else? Gone, sir. Something flickered across his expression, pain, maybe, or resignation. He closed his eyes. Smart of them. Eliza didn't answer. She lowered him back onto the pillows and wrung out a cloth in cool water, pressing it to his forehead. His breathing evened slightly. What's your name? His voice was barely a whisper. Eliza, Your Grace. Eliza Rowan. How long, have you worked here? 2 years, sir. He made a sound that might have been a laugh if he'd had the strength. 2 years, and I never... He didn't finish. The fever pulled him back under. That was the pattern for the first 3 days. He'd surface for minutes at a time, confused, feverish, sometimes lucid enough to drink or take broth. Then he'd slip away again, muttering things that didn't make sense. Eliza stayed. She sponged him down when the fever spiked, changed the sheets when he sweat through them, forced willow bark tea between his lips when he could swallow and held the basin when he couldn't. She slept in a chair by the window, waking every hour to check his breathing. Mrs. Hewitt brought supplies but never crossed the threshold. How is he? She'd ask from the hallway. Alive, Eliza would answer. That could change. I know. On the 4th night, he got worse. The fever spiked to terrifying heights. His skin so hot, Eliza genuinely feared he'd burn from the inside out. He thrashed, tangling himself in sheets, shouting things that made no sense. I didn't know. I swear I didn't. Your Grace, you need to stay still. Tell them I'm sorry. Tell Catherine I tried. His arm shot out, catching her across the shoulder hard enough to knock her back. She steadied herself and tried again, wrestling him back down. Your Grace, please. Let me go. Just let me... I can't do that, sir. Something in her voice cut through. He stopped fighting, eyes finding hers in the lamplight. For a second, he looked terrified. I'm dying. Not if I have anything to say about it, Eliza said firmly. She didn't know where the certainty came from. Maybe stubbornness, maybe desperation, but she meant it. He stared at her for a long moment. Then, impossibly, he almost smiled. Stubborn thing, aren't you? So I've been told, Your Grace. The fever broke near dawn. Not completely. He was still sick, still weak, but the killing edge had dulled. He slept without thrashing, breathed without rattling. Eliza slumped in her chair, exhausted, and let herself cry for exactly 2 minutes. Then she got up and changed the sheets again. By the 5th day, he could sit up without help. By the 6th, he could speak in full sentences. And by the 7th, he started asking questions. Why did you stay? It was evening. Eliza was spooning broth into his mouth. He was strong enough to hold the bowl now, but she didn't trust his hands not to shake. Someone had to, sir. That's not an answer. She paused, considering. Would you have left, Your Grace, if the situation were reversed? He was quiet for a long time. I'd like to think not, he said finally. But I don't know. I've never been tested that way. Well, I have been. And I stayed. He studied her. Really studied her, maybe for the first time. Took in the exhaustion written across her face, the shadows under her eyes, the raw determination that kept her upright. You're braver than my entire family combined, he said softly. Eliza looked away, uncomfortable. I'm just doing my job, sir. No, you're doing far more than that. She didn't answer, didn't know how. On the 8th day, he was strong enough to stand, though he nearly collapsed the first time he tried. Eliza caught him, staggering under his weight. Easy, Your Grace. I'm fine. You're not fine. You're barely recovered. Now sit down before you fall down. He laughed, actually laughed. The sound startled both of them. You're bossy when you're worried, he said, letting her guide him back to the bed. And you're stubborn when you're weak. We make quite a pair. The words hung between them, suddenly awkward. Eliza felt her face heat. I didn't mean, that is, I know what you meant. His expression softened. Thank you, Eliza, for everything. It was the first time he'd used her name. She nodded, not trusting her voice, and went to fetch more tea. On the 9th day, a messenger arrived from London. Eliza found Mrs. Hewitt in the corridor, reading the letter with a grim expression. What is it? Her ladyship is returning tomorrow, with the young masters. Mrs. Hewitt's mouth pressed into a thin line. Now that the danger's past, of course. Eliza felt something cold settle in her stomach. I see. She's also asking after the household accounts, specifically who remained during the crisis. Ah. Eliza, Mrs. Hewitt hesitated. You should prepare yourself. When they return, things will go back to how they were. You understand that, don't you? Eliza understood perfectly. The Duke would recover. His family would return. The crisis would fade into memory, turned into a dramatic story for dinner parties, and she would go back to being invisible. I understand, ma'am. That night she told the Duke, Your family returns tomorrow, Your Grace. He was sitting up in bed, reading, his strength returning quickly now. He looked up, and something complicated crossed his face. I see. You must be relieved. Must I? The words came out harsher than he probably intended. He softened his tone. Forgive me. I'm grateful they're safe. Of course I am. But? He set down the book. But they left. All of them. When I needed them most, they chose fear over everything. He looked at her. You stayed. I'm a servant, Your Grace. It's different. Is it? He held her gaze. You could have left just as easily, easier even. You had nothing to lose and everything to risk. They had everything to lose and chose to risk nothing. Eliza didn't know what to say to that. When they return, he continued quietly, everything will change again. The house will fill with noise and demands and all the usual chaos. And you'll disappear back into the walls, won't you? That's where I belong, sir. I'm not sure I agree anymore. The air between them felt suddenly fragile, dangerous. Your Grace, Alistair, he said it firmly. When we're alone, call me Alistair. I think you've earned that much. I couldn't possibly. You saved my life, Eliza. I'm fairly certain that supersedes protocol. She shook her head, smiling despite herself. You're going to get me dismissed. Never. The word came out fierce. I promise you that. Whatever happens when they return, you'll be protected. I swear it. Eliza wanted to believe him. Wanted to believe that promises from a duke meant something, that the rules could bend, that the world worked any way other than the way it always had. But she knew better. Get some rest, Your Grace, she said gently. Tomorrow will be a long day. She left before he could argue. That night, she packed her things. Not much. She'd never accumulated much. 2 spare dresses, a book her mother had given her, a small tin box with her wages saved over 2 years. She didn't know why she was preparing to leave. Just a feeling, a certainty settling in her bones. When Lady Catherine returned, When the world righted itself, there wouldn't be room for a maid who'd forgotten her place. Better to leave on her own terms. She was folding her second dress when she heard footsteps in the hall, heavier than Mrs. Hewitt's, slower than they should be. The Duke appeared in her doorway, leaning against the frame. He looked like hell, still pale, still weak, wearing a dressing gown that hung loose on his frame. "What are you doing out of bed?" Eliza demanded. "What are you doing with a packed bag?" They stared at each other. "I asked first," he said. "You're recovering from a deadly fever, Your Grace. You shouldn't be walking around, Alistair. And you certainly shouldn't be in the servants' quarters. Are you leaving?" The question cut through her deflection. She stopped, hands still on the folded dress. "I haven't decided yet." "Don't." He moved into the room, small, sparse, nothing like the grand chambers upstairs. "Please, don't go." "Your Grace." "Alistair." "This isn't appropriate." "I don't care." He crossed the space between them, and suddenly he was close enough that she could see the fever damage still written in his eyes, the vulnerability he'd never shown before. 9 days ago, I was dying. Everyone I thought I could count on abandoned me. Everyone except you. That doesn't change what I am. It changes everything. His voice dropped. You think when my wife returns, when my sons come back full of apologies and excuses, that I'll forget, that I'll go back to pretending the world works the way it's supposed to? That's exactly what you'll do, Eliza said quietly. Because that's how the world works, and I understand that, truly. I don't want to forget. You will anyway. People do. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he took her hand. His fingers were still too warm, skin paper thin, but his grip was steady. I won't forget, he said. I promise you. Whatever happens tomorrow, whatever they say or demand or expect, I won't forget what you did, who you are. Eliza felt something crack in her chest. She'd spent 2 years invisible, spent her whole life being overlooked, dismissed, forgotten the moment she left a room. And here was a duke, a man who could have anything, anyone, looking at her like she mattered. It was dangerous, impossible. Everything she'd been taught to never want. You should go back to bed, Your Grace, she whispered, before someone sees. Let them see. You don't mean that. Don't I? He smiled, tired, reckless, real. Maybe I'm done pretending. The fever's made you delirious. The fever's made me honest. He squeezed her hand once, then let go. Don't leave, Eliza, not yet. Give me a chance to, I don't know, figure out what comes next. She should say no, should pack her bag and be gone before dawn, before his family returned, before everything got complicated in ways she couldn't control. But she'd never been good at doing what she should. One more day, she heard herself say. I'll stay one more day. His smile could have lit the whole house. One day, he agreed. That's all I ask. He left then, slowly, carefully, leaning on the wall as he went. Eliza watched him go and wondered what the hell she'd just agreed to. Wondered why her heart was racing. Wondered what would happen tomorrow when the world came crashing back in. Outside her window, dawn was breaking. The staff would return within hours. Lady Catherine's carriage would roll up the drive. The sons would swagger through the front door like they'd never left. And Eliza would have to choose, disappear back into the walls where she belonged, or stand her ground and face whatever came next. She looked at her packed bag, at the small, sparse room that had been hers for 2 years. Then she unpacked, slowly, one piece at a time. Not because she thought things would work out. She wasn't that naive. But because for the first time in her life, someone had looked at her and seen something worth staying for. And maybe, just maybe, that was worth fighting for. Even if the fight was already lost. The carriages arrived at 10:30, rolling up the gravel drive like invading forces reclaiming conquered territory. Eliza heard them from the linen room where she'd been folding sheets, trying to look busy, trying to disappear into routine before the household reassembled itself around her. The sound of wheels on stone made her hands still mid-fold. It was starting. She'd known it would, had prepared herself all morning, moving through the manor like a ghost, avoiding the main corridors where the returning staff had already begun clustering, whispering, speculating, positioning themselves to look indispensable now that the danger had passed. Mary had returned first, full of dramatic tales about her supposedly sick sister. Peter followed, sheepish but defiant. By 9 o'clock, the kitchen was full again, everyone pretending the last 9 days hadn't happened. No one had asked about the Duke. No one had asked about Eliza. Now, standing in the linen room with her arms full of sheets that suddenly felt too heavy, she heard the first shouts from the entrance hall. Lady Catherine's voice, sharp and carrying, already issuing orders, reasserting control. Eliza set down the linens and closed her eyes. One more day, she'd promised. She was already regretting it. By the time she made it to the servants' corridor, the house had transformed. Noise everywhere. Footsteps, voices, doors slamming, the chaos of a household knitting itself back together. She pressed herself against the wall as a group of footmen rushed past, carrying trunks. Heard he nearly died. Doctor said it was touch and go. Wonder who stayed to nurse him. They didn't even glance at her. Eliza slipped into the back stairwell, taking the servants' route toward the east wing. She needed to check on the Duke one last time before his family descended. Needed to make sure he was presentable, that the room didn't still smell like sick room, that there was no evidence of just how close he'd come to dying alone. She was halfway up the stairs when she heard her name. Eliza Rowan. She turned. Mrs. Hewitt stood at the bottom of the stairwell, expression unreadable. Yes, ma'am? Her ladyship wants to see you, immediately. Eliza's stomach dropped. Did she say why? She doesn't need to say why. Mrs. Hewitt's voice softened slightly. Be careful, girl. Tread lightly. The warning was clear enough. Lady Catherine had set up temporary command in the morning room, her usual domain, all pale blue silk and uncomfortable furniture designed to make visitors feel inferior. She stood by the window when Eliza entered, back straight, hands clasped. She didn't turn around. You're the one who stayed. It wasn't a question. Eliza curtsied anyway, muscle memory taking over. Yes, my lady. Why? The same question everyone kept asking. Eliza still didn't have a good answer. Someone needed to, my lady. Needed to. Catherine turned then, and Eliza got her first clear look at the woman who'd married a duke and learned to wear power like armor. Mid-40s, blonde going silver, beautiful in the cold way expensive things were beautiful. My husband was dying of a contagious fever. Every sensible person in this household fled for their lives. But you, a maid, decided someone needed to stay? Yes, my lady. How noble. The word dripped sarcasm. And now you expect what? Gratitude? A reward? I expect nothing, my lady. Good. Because you'll receive nothing beyond your standard wages. Catherine moved closer, studying Eliza like she was examining a potentially defective purchase. I know your type. Girls who think one moment of usefulness entitles them to familiarity, who forget their place. Eliza kept her eyes down. I know my place, my lady. Do you? Because Mrs. Hewitt tells me you've been alone with His Grace for 9 days, unchaperoned, tending to his personal needs. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Eliza's hands clenched at her sides. I was nursing him, my lady. Nothing more. Of course you were. Catherine's smile was thin. I'm sure it was all very proper, very professional. A servant doing her duty. Yes, my lady. Then you won't mind returning to your regular duties immediately. I'll be assigning a proper nurse to oversee His Grace's continued recovery. Your services are no longer required in that capacity. The dismissal was clear. Eliza should have felt relieved. This was exactly what she'd expected, what she'd prepared for. Back to invisibility. Back to safety. Instead, she felt something hot and dangerous rise in her chest. His Grace might prefer— His Grace, Catherine interrupted, voice dropping to ice, will prefer whatever I tell him to prefer. Am I understood? Eliza met her eyes, saw the warning there, the threat. Yes, my lady. Good. You're dismissed. Eliza curtsied and left before she could say something stupid, before she could point out that Catherine had abandoned her husband to die alone, before she could ask what kind of wife locked herself away while the man she'd promised to cherish burned with fever. She made it to the servants' corridor before her hands started shaking. That went well, I see. Eliza jumped. The Duke, Alistair, stood in the shadowed alcove near the back stairs, still wearing his dressing gown, looking like he might collapse any second. What are you doing out of bed? She hissed. Escaping my loving family. He pushed off the wall, swaying slightly. Catherine's back, I take it? You shouldn't be walking around. I heard voices. Wanted to make sure you were all right. He studied her face. You're not all right. I'm fine, Your Grace. Alistair, you need to get back to your room before someone sees you here. Let them see. He said it louder than necessary, reckless. I'm allowed to speak with my own staff, aren't I? Not like this. Not here. Eliza glanced down the corridor nervously. Please, this will only make things worse. Worse for who? For me! The words came out sharper than she intended. She lowered her voice. Your Grace, your wife has made it very clear that my services are no longer required. I've been reassigned. There's a nurse coming to take over your care. That's how it should be. That's how it should be, he repeated slowly. According to who? According to everyone. According to the way the world works. I'm starting to hate the way the world works. Despite everything, Eliza almost smiled. That's the fever talking. No, that's me talking. The fever just made me brave enough to say it out loud. He took a step closer. Don't let her bully you, Eliza. You saved my life. That matters. It doesn't matter enough, she said quietly. Not in the ways that count. Before he could respond, voices echoed from the main corridor, his sons calling for him. Alistair's expression flickered with something complicated. I have to go, he said, but this isn't over. Yes, it is, Your Grace. It has to be. She slipped past him and down the back stairs before he could argue, before she could look at his face and see disappointment, before she could make this any harder than it already was. The rest of the day passed in a blur of work and avoidance. Eliza threw herself into duties, scrubbing floors that didn't need scrubbing, polishing silver that already gleamed, anything to stay busy and invisible. She ate dinner in the servants' hall with her head down, ignoring the whispers. By evening, the household had almost returned to normal. The Duke's sons held court in the drawing room, entertaining guests with exaggerated tales of their concern. Lady Catherine presided over dinner like nothing had happened. The new nurse, a severe woman named Mrs. Blackwell, had taken over the East Wing with military efficiency, everything back in its proper place. Eliza was changing linens in one of the guest rooms when she heard the argument. It was coming from the Duke's study, voices raised, carrying through the walls. She shouldn't listen, should finish her work and leave. She pressed her ear to the door instead. Absolutely unacceptable. That was Catherine, furious. I don't care if it's unacceptable. I'm stating facts. Alistair's voice, weaker but stubborn. Facts? You want facts? You nearly died. You were delirious for days. You have no idea what that girl might have... That girl saved my life while you hid 3 floors away. Silence. Then Catherine's voice, dangerously quiet. How dare you? How dare I? How dare you? Furniture scraped. He must have stood up. I was dying, Catherine, dying, and you locked yourself away like I was already rotting in the ground. I was protecting our sons. Our sons are grown men who ran like cowards. Don't dress it up as sacrifice. You're being unreasonable. I'm being honest. For the first time in years, I'm being completely honest. A pause. She stayed, Catherine. One servant girl with nothing to gain and everything to lose. She stayed when my own family wouldn't. And now you're what? Infatuated with her? Don't be absurd. I'm grateful to her. There's a difference. Is there? Catherine's voice sharpened. Because from where I'm standing, you're dangerously close to making a fool of yourself over a pretty face and a convenient crisis. She's not... This isn't about... He stopped. Started again. I'm not discussing this further. Eliza Rowan will be treated with respect in this house. She'll be compensated appropriately for what she did. And she will not be dismissed or punished for having more courage than the rest of us combined. I'm your wife, Alistair, not your servant. You don't give me orders. Then don't force me to. The silence that followed was deadly. I see. Catherine's voice had gone cold. So that's how it is. That's not what I meant. I think it's exactly what you meant. How long did it take, I wonder? How many fever dreams before you started confusing gratitude for something else? You're being ridiculous. Am I? Then prove it. Send her away. Tonight. If she truly means nothing, if this is just about proper recognition, then reassign her to another property. Pay her handsomely and remove the temptation. No? No? She stays. That's final. Eliza's breath caught. She should move, should leave before someone found her eavesdropping, but her feet had rooted to the floor. Then you're a fool, Catherine said, and I won't watch you destroy this family over a girl who was simply doing her job. The door slammed open so hard it nearly hit Eliza in the face. She stumbled back as Catherine stormed out, face white with rage. Their eyes met for a single, terrible second. Catherine smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. Eavesdropping now? How professional. She swept past before Eliza could respond, leaving her standing in the corridor with her heart hammering and her career probably over. Alistair appeared in the doorway, looking exhausted. How much did you hear? Enough. Eliza's voice came out steady despite everything. Your Grace, you can't do this. You can't jeopardize your marriage over what? Over basic decency? Over refusing to let my wife bully someone who saved my life? Over me! The words burst out. Don't pretend this is about principle. She's right. You're grateful and you're confusing it for something else, and when you realize that, I'll be the one who pays the price. You think that's what this is? He moved closer. You think I don't know the difference? I think you nearly died and I was there, and now everything feels more dramatic than it actually is. She forced herself to meet his eyes. In a week, in a month, when you're fully recovered and back to your normal life, you'll forget. And I'll still be a maid who forgot her place. I won't forget. You will. People always do. Not me. Especially you. The frustration broke through. You're a duke. You have a wife, sons, responsibilities, an entire world that runs on rules we both know I'm breaking just by having this conversation. You think you're different, but you're not. In the end, you'll choose your world. Everyone does. Then I'll prove you wrong. You can't. Watch me. He said it with such certainty that for a second she almost believed him. Almost let herself imagine that rules could bend, that the world could work differently, that a duke and a servant girl could... No. She cut the thought off before it could finish forming. I need to go, she said quietly. Before this gets any worse. Eliza, please, Your Grace, let me go. She walked away before he could argue, before she could see his face, before she could make the mistake of staying. The next 3 days were torture. Alistair pushed back against every attempt to isolate her, requested her specifically for tasks, made excuses to cross her path, defended her loudly to anyone who questioned her presence. And with every defense, every insistence, every public declaration of gratitude, he made things worse. The other servants noticed, started whispering. Mary gave her knowing looks. Peter avoided her entirely. Even Mrs. Hewitt pulled her aside with warnings Eliza didn't need. Whatever's happening, end it. Nothing's happening, then stop looking at him like that. And tell him to stop looking at you like that. Before someone gets hurt. But Eliza couldn't control how he looked at her. Couldn't control the way he found excuses to speak with her. The way he lit up when she entered a room. The way he'd started fighting with his wife daily. She heard the arguments. Everyone did. The whole household heard them screaming at each other behind closed doors. Catherine accusing, Alistair defending, both of them saying things that couldn't be unsaid. And through it all, Eliza tried to disappear. Tried to do her job and be invisible and wait for this whole mess to blow over. But on the fourth night, everything exploded. It started at dinner, a formal affair, guests from neighboring estates, everyone dressed in their finest. Eliza was serving, moving through the dining room with a wine pitcher, practically invisible, until Lady Catherine spoke. Tell me, Lord Pemberton, what do you think of servants who overstep their bounds? The table went quiet. Alistair's head snapped up. Catherine, I'm curious, she continued, voice light and poisonous. When a servant forgets her place, should we blame the servant or the master who allows such familiarity? Lord Pemberton looked uncomfortable. I'm not sure I follow. Don't you? I'll speak plainly then. When my husband was ill, one of our maids took it upon herself to nurse him, alone, for 9 days, unchaperoned. She paused delicately. One wonders what else she took upon herself. Eliza's hands tightened on the wine pitcher. The room was staring now. All of them. That's enough. Alistair's voice was steel. Is it? Because I think our guests deserve to understand the situation. After all, you've been so vocal about this girl's supposed heroism. Perhaps they should hear the whole story. There is no story. Isn't there? A young maid. A vulnerable duke. 9 days alone together. No witnesses. And now he defends her so passionately one might think, stop talking. Alistair stood, chair scraping back. Right now. Why? Afraid of the truth? The truth is you're bitter and vindictive and taking it out on someone who doesn't deserve it. Catherine smiled. Or perhaps the truth is you've developed an inappropriate attachment, and you're too proud to admit it. The words hung in the air like a bomb. Alistair's face went white, then red. You've crossed a line. Have I? Then prove me wrong. Send her away, tonight. Unless, of course, I'm right. Eliza couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Every eye in the room was on her now, judging, speculating, stripping her bare. She should leave, should set down the pitcher and walk out and never come back. But before she could move, Alistair spoke. Fine. You want truth? Here it is. He turned to face the room. Eliza Rowan saved my life while my family fled, while every person in this house chose their own safety. She stayed. She nursed me through a fever that should have killed me. She showed more courage in 9 days than most of us show in a lifetime. And if you want to twist that into something ugly, if you want to make it sordid and shameful, then you're the one who should be ashamed, not her. The silence was deafening. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm done with this dinner. He threw down his napkin. Catherine, when you're ready to apologize to the woman who saved your husband's life, you know where to find me. He walked out. Eliza stood frozen, holding the wine pitcher, wanting the floor to swallow her whole. Catherine's voice cut through the shock. Well, that was illuminating. She turned to Eliza, smile sharp as glass. You're dismissed. Pack your things. I want you gone by morning. This time, no one argued. Eliza set down the pitcher carefully, curtsied, and left the room on legs that barely held her. She made it to her room before the shaking started. This was it. Done. Over. She'd been dismissed in front of the entire household, humiliated, accused of... She didn't even want to think about what they were saying. She started packing mechanically. Same bag as before. Same 2 dresses. Same small life fitting into one case. She was almost finished when Alistair appeared in her doorway. Don't. I have to, Your Grace. Stop calling me that. He looked wild, desperate. And stop packing. You're not going anywhere. Your wife dismissed me. My wife doesn't run this household. I do. That's not how it works. Then I'll make it work. He crossed the room, taking her hands. Stay. Please. I'll fix this. I'll talk to Catherine. I'll make her understand. There's nothing to understand, Eliza pulled away. She's right. About all of it. We've been inappropriate. I've been inappropriate. This whole situation has gotten out of control, and the only way to stop it is for me to leave. I won't let you up. You don't have a choice. Her voice broke. Don't you see? Every time you defend me, you make it worse. Every time you fight for me, you prove her point. She thinks there's something between us and you're acting like there is. Maybe there is. The words dropped like stones. Eliza stared at him. What? Maybe there is something between us, he repeated quietly. Maybe that's what terrifies me. Not the fever, not dying, but the idea that the only person who saw me as human instead of a title was someone I'm not supposed to notice. Don't say that. Why not? It's true. He moved closer. I'm tired of pretending, Eliza. Tired of playing the part of the grateful Duke while feeling something I'm not supposed to feel. You're confused. The fever has nothing to do with this. His hands framed her face. I know what I feel, and I think you feel it too. She should pull away, should slap him, should do anything except stand there with her heart racing and her carefully built walls crumbling. It doesn't matter what I feel, she whispered. We both know how this ends. Then let's change the ending. We can, if we're brave enough. Brave? She laughed, broken. Brave is walking away before we both get destroyed, before you lose everything that matters for something that can't possibly work. You matter. I'm a maid. You're the woman who saved my life, who saw me at my weakest and didn't flinch, who stayed when everyone else ran. His thumb brushed her cheek. You're the bravest person I've ever met, and I'm not letting you go." Eliza closed her eyes, felt tears slip free. "This is wrong," she said. "You know it's wrong." "Then why does it feel like the only right thing I've done in years?" She didn't have an answer for that. The kiss, when it came, wasn't like the book she'd read in secret. Wasn't smooth or perfect or magical. It was desperate and scared and tasted like tears. It was everything she'd been trying not to want, breaking free all at once. And it was a mistake. She pulled back, gasping. I can't, Eliza." "No." She grabbed her bag. "This is exactly why I have to leave. Before we do something we can't take back. Before you ruin your life for you." He said it firmly. "Say it. For you. It doesn't matter. It's the only thing that matters." Footsteps in the hallway. Voices. Someone was coming. Eliza shoved past him, bag in hand, running before she could change her mind. She took the servants' stairs 2 at a time, burst out into the courtyard, kept going. She made it to the gates before she stopped, gasping, crying, shaking. Behind her, the manor blazed with light. Inside, his life waited. Wife, sons, legacy, everything he was supposed to want. Ahead, the dark road stretched empty. She took a step forward, then another, and didn't look back. She made it 3 miles before her legs gave out. Eliza collapsed on a stone wall bordering some farmer's field, gasping, shaking, her bag clutched against her chest like armor. The night air bit through her thin dress. Behind her, somewhere in the darkness, Vane Manor still blazed, a constellation of lights she couldn't see anymore but felt anyway, pulling at her like gravity. She'd run, actually run, like a thief, like something guilty. Her fingers touched her lips. Still felt him there, the desperation, the impossibility of it, the way he'd looked at her like she was worth destroying everything for. Idiot. Both of them. Complete idiots. A carriage rattled past on the main road, and Eliza shrank back instinctively. But it didn't slow. Didn't see her. Just another shadow by the roadside. She had 16 pounds saved, a letter of reference she'd never dare use, 2 dresses and a book. That was it. That was everything she owned in the world. Not enough to start over, barely enough to survive a month. She pressed her face to her knees and tried not to cry again. She'd already cried enough tonight. Crying wouldn't help. Wouldn't change anything. Wouldn't make her less ruined, or him less married, or the world less brutal to girls who forgot their place. The next carriage that passed did stop. Eliza's head snapped up at the sound of wheels slowing, hoofbeats settling. A small, practical coach, not fancy, but not cheap either. The driver, an older man with kind eyes, leaned down. "You all right, miss?" "Fine." Her voice came out hoarse. "Just resting." "At midnight? On a country road?" He didn't sound convinced. "Where you headed?" Eliza opened her mouth, closed it. She had no answer. "Nowhere good, I'm guessing." He nodded like he'd expected that. "Well, I'm going to Ashford. There's a coaching inn there. Decent place, safe. You'd make it by dawn. Cost you 2 shillings. 2 shillings. More than she should spend, but the alternative was walking through the night alone, and she was already exhausted. "All right," she heard herself say. The ride passed in silence. Eliza sat in the corner, watching the countryside blur past, trying not to think, trying not to feel. Every mile away from the manor should have brought relief. Instead, it just felt like ripping something vital out by the roots. Ashford appeared as the sky started graying, a market town, respectable size, anonymous enough. The coaching inn sat on the main square, warm light spilling from its windows. The driver helped her down. "You take care now, miss. Whatever you're running from. Hope it's worth it." Eliza paid him and didn't answer. The inn had a room, small, drafty, but clean. She paid for 3 nights, buying herself time to figure out what came next. The innkeeper's wife, a sharp-eyed woman named Mrs. Garrett, looked her over with the assessing gaze of someone who'd seen too many lost girls. "You in trouble?" "No, ma'am." "You sure? Because we don't want that kind of—" "I'm not pregnant," Eliza said flatly. "Just between positions." Mrs. Garrett's expression softened slightly. "Well, you need work. There's a dressmaker down the street looking for help. Mrs. Monroe. Tell her I sent you." "Thank you." Eliza made it to her room before the shaking started again. She sat on the narrow bed, staring at nothing, and tried to process what she'd done. She'd left, actually left. No plan, no future, no idea what happened next. And somewhere behind her, Alistair was probably tearing the manor apart looking for her. The thought made her chest ache. "Stop it," she told herself viciously. "Stop thinking about him. He's not yours. Never was." She lay down without undressing, pulled the thin blanket over herself, and waited for sleep that didn't come. The next morning brought rain and reality in equal measure. Eliza woke with her head pounding and her eyes gritty. She forced herself up, washed her face in the basin, braided her hair with fingers that still trembled. In the small spotted mirror she looked pale, haunted, like someone who'd made a terrible mistake and couldn't take it back. She found the dressmaker's shop where Mrs. Garrett said it would be. Mrs. Monroe turned out to be a woman in her 50s, stern-faced and efficient. She looked Eliza up and down. "You sew?" "Yes, ma'am." "I can do basic mending, alterations. I need someone who can handle finishing work. Hems, buttons, detail stitching. Pay is 3 shillings a week plus meals. You start today." It wasn't much, barely survival wages. But it was something. "I'll take it." Mrs. Monroe nodded. "Good. You'll work 6 days, dawn to dusk, Sundays off. No men in the workroom, no gossip, no drinking. Break any of those rules and you're out. Clear?" "Yes, ma'am." "Then get your apron on. We've got a rush order for the Talbot wedding." The work was mind-numbing. Hours of tiny stitches, squinting in bad light, fingers cramping. But Eliza threw herself into it gratefully. Anything to stop thinking, anything to fill the hollow space in her chest. The other seamstresses, 3 girls younger than her, whispered among themselves but mostly left her alone. They probably had theories about her, probably thought she was running from something. They weren't wrong. 3 days passed, then a week. Eliza settled into a rhythm. Wake at dawn, work until dark, return to her room, sleep poorly, repeat. She was careful with her money. Ate little, spoke less. Mrs. Monroe approved. "You're a hard worker. Don't talk much, but that's fine by me." On the 8th day, a man came into the shop. Eliza was in the back room, hemming a wedding dress, when she heard Mrs. Monroe's voice change, going formal, deferential. "Of course, sir. I'll see if she's available." Warning prickled down Eliza's spine. She looked up as Mrs. Monroe appeared in the doorway. "Someone here to see you." "Who?" "Says his name is Edward Vane." The needle slipped, pricking her finger. Blood welled up bright red against white silk. No, not possible. He couldn't have found her. Shouldn't have. "Tell him I'm working," Eliza said quickly. "Tell him, I think you should see him." Mrs. Monroe's expression was unreadable. "He's been quite insistent." Eliza set down the dress with shaking hands, sucked the blood from her finger, stood up. Edward waited in the front of the shop, examining a bolt of fabric like he cared about thread count. He looked exactly like his father, same height, same dark hair, same aristocratic features. But where Alistair had warmth buried under the formality, Edward had nothing but cold calculation. He looked up when she entered, smiled without humor. "Miss Rowan, how resourceful of you. What do you want?" "Straight to it, then. I appreciate that." He set down the fabric. "My father sent me to find you." Her heart lurched. "I have nothing to say to him. He thought you might say that, which is why he sent me instead of coming himself." Edward's smile sharpened. "Though between us, I think he would have come anyway. Man's been impossible since you left. Hardly sleeps, barely eats, snaps at everyone. It's quite the performance." "I don't care." "Don't you? Because from where I'm standing, you care quite a bit. Enough to run away in the middle of the night, enough to hide in a nowhere town working for pennies." He took a step closer. "My father is destroying his marriage over you. Thought you should know that." Eliza's stomach twisted. "That's not my fault, isn't it? You could have left quietly when Mother first asked, could have taken a generous severance and disappeared. Instead, you stayed. Let him defend you. Let him make a fool of himself." Edward's voice dropped. "Let him kiss you." Her face must have shown something because Edward laughed. "Oh yes, I know about that. Servants talk, always do. The whole household knows the Duke kissed the maid in her bedroom. Quite the scandal." "Nothing happened. Yes, bien," Something happened enough that you ran. He circled her slowly. Here's what I think. I think you're a clever girl who saw an opportunity. A sick duke, a grateful moment, a chance to climb higher than you ever should have reached. And now it's gotten messy, and you're trying to extract yourself before the whole thing explodes. That's not... I never wanted... What did you want then? Love? He made the word sound obscene. You think a duke can marry a maid? That you'd, what? Become a duchess? Live happily ever after? I never thought that. Then what are you doing here? The question cracked like a whip. If you don't want him, why not take the money and disappear properly? Go to London, start fresh where no one knows you. Unless... He paused. Unless you're waiting for him to come after you. I'm not... Aren't you? Hiding close enough to be found but far enough to seem noble. Playing the martyr, the tragic heroine who sacrificed herself. Edward leaned in. Clever. I'll give you that. Eliza's hands clenched. Get out. I'm not finished. I said get out. The words came out louder than she intended. Mrs. Monroe and the other girls looked up sharply. I don't care what you think. I don't care what your father does. I left because staying would have destroyed him. That's the truth. Whether you believe it or not. Edward studied her for a long moment. Something shifted in his expression. You really think you were protecting him? I know I was. By breaking his heart? Better his heart than his life. Edward laughed, genuinely this time, though it sounded bitter. You're more naive than I thought. You think leaving saves him? Mother's already spreading rumors, saying you seduced him during his illness, painting you as a scheming little opportunist who took advantage of a vulnerable man. The words hit like stones. That's a lie. Of course it's a lie. But it's a useful lie. One that protects the family name while destroying yours. He straightened his cuffs. In 6 months, no one will remember the maid who saved the Duke's life. They'll only remember the maid who tried to trap him. Then I made the right choice, Eliza said quietly. Leaving. Did you? Because Father's not letting this go. He's been to every town within 20 miles looking for you. Asked every innkeeper, every shop owner. It's only a matter of time before he shows up here himself. And when he does, when he makes a scene, when he demands you come back, when he offers you anything you want, what then? Eliza didn't answer. Couldn't. That's what I thought. Edward headed for the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I think you probably did save his life. And I think you're trying to do the right thing now. But the right thing and the smart thing aren't always the same. He left without waiting for a response. Eliza stood frozen in the empty shop, Mrs. Monroe's suspicious gaze burning into her back. Is that true? The dressmaker's voice was cold. About the Duke? It's complicated. I don't want complicated. I want simple. You're not bringing scandal to my shop. Mrs. Monroe, please, finish today's work, then collect your wages and leave. I won't have my business ruined because you couldn't keep your place. The dismissal landed like a blow. Eliza wanted to argue, to explain, to make her understand. But what was the point? Edward was right. The story was already written. She was already ruined. She went back to the workroom and finished hemming the wedding dress with fingers that barely worked. The other girls whispered. She ignored them. At the end of the day, Mrs. Monroe paid her what she was owed. Exact, cold, final. You should leave town, she said, before this gets worse. Eliza took the money and left. She made it back to the inn before the tears started, sat on her bed and counted her remaining funds. £21 now, maybe enough for London, maybe enough to disappear properly, like Edward suggested, maybe enough to stop hoping Alistair would find her. She was still sitting there when someone knocked on her door. Her heart jumped. She stood slowly, wiped her eyes, opened the door, expecting Mrs. Garrett, the innkeeper's wife. There's a gentleman downstairs asking for you, she said carefully. Says it's urgent. Did he give a name? Said you'd know who he was. Eliza's breath caught. Tell him I'm not here. Already tried that. He's not leaving until he sees you. Of course he wasn't. Eliza closed her eyes. Give me a minute. She washed her face, straightened her dress, tried to prepare herself for what came next. But when she came down the stairs and saw him waiting in the inn's small parlor, nothing could have prepared her. Alistair looked terrible, thinner than before, exhaustion written in every line of his face. He wore traveling clothes, mud-splattered, like he'd been riding hard. When he saw her, relief and anguish crossed his expression in equal measure. Eliza. Just her name, like a prayer. She stopped on the bottom step. You shouldn't be here. I know. Your wife left 3 days ago. Took the boys and went to her sister's in Bath. He said it flatly, like it didn't matter, like his marriage hadn't just imploded. Before she left, she made sure everyone in our circle knew the story, her version, the one where you're the villain. I know, your son told me. Edward was here? Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. What did he say to you? The truth. That I'm ruining your life. That I should disappear completely. She forced herself to stay calm. He was right. He was protecting himself, protecting the family name. Alistair took a step forward. She took a step back. He stopped. Eliza, please, just listen. No, because if I listen, I'll make another mistake. We both will. Wanting you isn't a mistake. It is. Look at what's happened. Your wife's left. Your reputation's damaged. The entire world thinks I'm a... Her voice broke. This is exactly what I was trying to prevent. Then you failed. He said it gently, because the damage is done. Catherine's spreading rumors whether you're there or not. Society's judging whether we fight it or not. Running didn't protect anything. It protected you from doing something stupid. Like what? Choosing happiness over obligation? Choosing someone who actually sees me over someone who tolerates me? Choosing a maid over a duchess? The words exploded out. That's what you'd be doing. And you can dress it up however you want. Call it love or fate or whatever helps you sleep. But at the end of the day, you'd be throwing away everything that matters for you, he interrupted. Say it, for you. For someone you barely know. I know you stayed when everyone else ran. I know you fought for my life harder than my own family. I know you make me feel more alive than I have in 20 years. He moved closer. She didn't step back this time. I know that when I woke up and you were gone, it felt worse than dying. That's guilt talking. It's love talking. The word hung between them like something fragile and impossible. Don't, Eliza whispered. Please don't say that. Why not? It's true. Because it doesn't matter. Her eyes burned. Love doesn't change what we are. Doesn't change that you're a duke and I'm a servant. Doesn't change that the whole world would rather see me dead than see us together. Then we'll change the world. We can try. He reached for her hands. This time she let him. Come back with me. Not as a servant, as what? Your mistress? Your secret shame? She pulled away. I won't do that. I won't be that. Then marry me. The room went silent. Eliza stared at him, certain she'd misheard. What? Marry me, he repeated, and she could see the decision settling over him like armor. I'll divorce Catherine. It'll be a scandal. It'll cost me almost everything, but it can be done. And when it is, I'll marry you. Properly. Publicly. You're insane. Probably. He smiled, and it was the most reckless thing she'd ever seen. But I'm also certain. For the first time in my entire life, I'm completely certain about something. Your sons would never forgive you. Then they'll learn to live with disappointment, like I've been doing for years. The estate, your title, everything you've built, means nothing if I'm miserable. He cupped her face. Don't you understand? I've spent my whole life doing what was expected. Marrying who I should, playing the role I was born to. And the only time I've ever felt like myself, the only time I've ever felt real, was when I was dying and you refused to let me go. Tears slipped down her cheeks. This is crazy. Yes. It'll destroy you. Not having you would destroy me worse. What if... Her voice broke. What if you change your mind? What if in a year, 2 years, you wake up and realize you gave up everything for something that wasn't worth it? Then I'll have given it up for the right reasons. His thumb brushed away her tears. I'd rather have 1 honest year with you than 20 more pretending with someone else. Eliza closed her eyes, felt the impossible weight of what he was offering. A life, a future. Everything she'd never let herself want because wanting it was too dangerous. If I say yes, she whispered, there's no going back. You understand that? Once you start this, once you file for divorce, there's no undoing it. I know. Your mother will disown you. Your friends will cut you off. You'll lose half your fortune in the settlement, maybe more. I know. And at the end of it all, you'll have me. Just me. A girl with no family, no name, no connections. That's all you'll have. That's all I want. She opened her eyes, looked at him, really looked, saw the determination there, the certainty, the reckless hope, and saw her own reflection in his eyes. Someone worth fighting for. This is the worst decision either of us will ever make, she said. He smiled. Probably. We'll regret it. Maybe. People will hate us. Definitely. She laughed despite everything, a broken, desperate sound. Then I guess we're both idiots. Say yes, Eliza. She should say no, should be smart, should protect them both from the disaster waiting ahead, but she'd never been good at doing what she should. Yes, she whispered. He kissed her then, different from before. Not desperate or scared, just sure, like a promise. When they broke apart, Mrs. Garrett was standing in the doorway, arms crossed. I'll pretend I didn't see that, she said dryly. But you should know. There's another gentleman downstairs asking for you both. Says his name is Edward Vane, and he doesn't look happy. Alistair's expression hardened. Tell him to leave. Tried that. He says if you don't come down, he's coming up, and he's got 2 men with him. The implications settled like ice. Eliza's hand tightened on Alistair's. What's he doing? Protecting the family name, by force, if necessary. Alistair's jaw set. Stay here. No. Eliza, that's it. I'm not hiding. Not anymore. She straightened her shoulders. Whatever happens next, we face it together. He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. They went downstairs together. Edward stood in the inn's entrance hall, flanked by 2 large men Eliza didn't recognize. His expression was cold fury. Father, you need to come home. Now. No. This isn't a request. Mother's already filed papers with her solicitor. She's claiming abandonment and adultery. If you don't return immediately and end this, whatever this is, you'll lose everything. I've already made my choice. Your choice? Edward's voice rose. Your choice is to throw away our family for a servant? To humiliate Mother? To make us all a laughingstock? My choice is to stop lying, to stop pretending. Alistair's voice stayed steady. I should have done it years ago. You're being manipulated. I'm being honest. Finally. Edward's gaze shifted to Eliza. This is your doing. No, Alistair said sharply. This is mine. Leave her out of it. Leave her out of it? She's the center of it. Edward took a step forward. His men moved with him. Last chance, Father. Come home. End this quietly, or I'll make sure she disappears so completely you'll never find her again. The threat hung in the air like drawn steel. Alistair moved in front of Eliza. Touch her, and I'll destroy you. You'll destroy yourself first. Then we both go down. His voice dropped to something dangerous. But she stays safe. That's not negotiable. Father and son stared at each other. The tension was suffocating. Finally, Edward stepped back. You're making the biggest mistake of your life. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. Mother will take everything. The house, the money, the title's holdings. You'll have nothing. I'll have what matters. Edward shook his head slowly. I don't even know who you are anymore. Good, because I was never who you thought I was. Edward turned and walked out. His men followed. The door slammed behind them. Silence settled heavy and terrible. Alistair's shoulders sagged. Eliza reached for his hand. Are you sure? She whispered. Really sure? He looked at her. Despite everything, despite the threats, the consequences, the disaster ahead, he smiled. Never been more sure of anything. Mrs. Garrett cleared her throat from behind the desk. You two should leave, tonight, before they come back with more men and worse intentions. She was right. Eliza knew she was right. Where do we go? She asked. Alistair squeezed her hand. Anywhere. Everywhere. Does it matter? It didn't. They left Ashford before midnight, riding in a hired coach toward London, toward uncertainty, toward a future that would probably destroy them both. but they left together. And as the miles passed and the night deepened and the world they knew faded behind them, Eliza realized something terrifying. She just bet everything on a man she barely knew, on a love that shouldn't exist, on a future that might not survive the week. And she had no idea if she'd made the bravest choice of her life, or the worst. London swallowed them whole. The coach rattled through streets that never slept. Even at 2 a.m, the city pulsed with life. Street vendors hawking day-old bread, drunks stumbling from taverns, women in doorways calling to passers-by. Eliza pressed her face to the window, watching it all blur past, trying not to think about what they'd just done, trying not to panic. Alistair sat across from her, staring at his hands. He hadn't spoken in over an hour, just sat there, jaw tight, processing what he'd walked away from. Every mile from Ashford was a mile further from the life he'd known for 43 years. "We need a plan," Eliza said finally. He looked up. "What?" "A plan. We can't just wander. We need somewhere to stay. Money, strategy." She was talking too fast, anxiety bleeding through. "Your son was right. Your wife will take everything. We need to figure out what that means, how to protect ourselves." "Eliza." He reached across, taking her hand. "Breathe." "I'm breathing." "You're spiraling." His thumb brushed her knuckles. "We'll figure it out, one step at a time." "What's step one?" He was quiet for a moment. "Honestly, I don't know." The admission should have terrified her. Instead, it was almost comforting. At least he wasn't pretending to have all the answers. "I have some money," she offered. "Not much, but we're not using your savings." "Then what are we using? Because unless you've got funds your wife can't touch." "I do, actually." He leaned back, thinking. "A trust from my mother, set up before I married. Catherine has no claim to it. It's not much, maybe £4,000, but it's something. £4,000. To Eliza, that was a fortune. To a duke accustomed to managing estates worth hundreds of thousands, it was pocket change. "That'll last us a while," she said carefully. "If we're smart." "If we're smart." He laughed, but it sounded hollow. Smart would have been walking away. Smart would have been listening to every single person who told us this was insane. "Second thoughts?" "No." He said it quickly, then softer. "No, just reality setting in, I suppose." The coach stopped in front of a modest hotel in Bloomsbury. Nothing fancy, but clean, respectable, the kind of place that asked no questions if you paid in advance. Alistair helped her down, then spoke quietly to the driver, passing him extra coins. Buying discretion, Eliza realized, making sure no one remembered which direction they'd come from. Inside, the night clerk barely looked up from his ledger. "Room for two?" Alistair hesitated. Eliza saw the calculation cross his face. Separate rooms looked proper, but cost more. Same room was practical, but damning if anyone found out. "Yes," he said. "For my wife and myself." The lie came smooth as silk. The clerk didn't blink. "Sign here. Payment in advance, £3 for the week." Alistair signed a name Eliza didn't recognize. John Martin. The clerk handed over a key. "Second floor, end of the hall. Breakfast at 7 if you want it." Their room was small, plain, dominated by a single narrow bed. Eliza stood in the doorway, suddenly aware of the absurdity. Hours ago, she'd been a maid. Now she was pretending to be a wife, sharing a room with a man she'd kissed twice, a man who'd just destroyed his life for her. "I'll sleep on the floor," Alistair said quickly. "Don't be ridiculous." "Eliza, we're not." He stopped, running a hand through his hair. "Just because I said those things doesn't mean I expect." "I know," she set down her bag, "but the bed's barely big enough for one person, let alone two, and the floor's filthy. We'll just manage, like adults." His mouth quirked. "Adults who've made catastrophically poor decisions." "Those two." They settled awkwardly, her on one side of the bed, him on the other, a careful gap between them. The darkness felt heavy, intimate. Eliza stared at the ceiling and tried not to think about how close he was. "Eliza?" "Yes?" "Are you afraid?" She considered lying, decided against it. "Terrified." "Me too." His hand found hers in the dark. She held on. Sleep came eventually, restless and thin. When Eliza woke, Gray morning light filtered through dirty windows. Alistair was already up, standing by the window, dressed in yesterday's clothes, staring out at the street below. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "That I have no idea what I'm doing." He didn't turn around. "I've spent my entire adult life managing estates, running a household, making decisions that affected hundreds of people. And now I can't even figure out what we should do next." Eliza sat up. "We need a solicitor, someone who can tell us exactly what the divorce will cost and how to protect what's left. I know a man. Bartholomew Green handled my mother's estate. Discreet." Alistair finally turned. "He'll also probably try to talk me out of this. Everyone will try to talk you out of this. Does that bother you?" "Constantly." She managed a weak smile. "But we're already here. Might as well see it through." Bartholomew Green's office sat in a narrow building off Fleet Street, sandwiched between a printer and a tobacco shop. The solicitor himself was a thin man in his 60s, all sharp angles and sharper eyes. He looked up when they entered, and his expression went from professional to shocked in seconds. "Your Grace, we weren't expecting—" "I need your help, Bartholomew, urgently," Alistair gestured to Eliza. "This is Miss Eliza Rowan. She'll be part of this conversation." Green's gaze flickered between them, calculating, understanding dawning. "I see. Please sit." They settled into chairs across from his desk. Green steepled his fingers. "You want a divorce?" "Yes." "Your wife will fight it." "I know. It will be expensive, ugly, public." Green leaned forward. "Your Grace, I have to ask, are you certain? Because once this begins, there's no dignified way to stop it." "I'm certain." Green looked at Eliza. "And you, Miss Rowan, do you understand what you're stepping into?" "Not entirely," she admitted. "But I'm here anyway." Something almost like respect crossed the solicitor's face. "All right then, let's discuss realities." He pulled out papers, began making notes. First, the grounds. England recognizes divorce only under specific circumstances: adultery, cruelty, desertion. Your wife will likely claim adultery. Can she prove it? "We kissed," Alistair said bluntly. "Once, before I left. Servants witnessed it." "That's enough." Green wrote something. "She'll use it. You could counterclaim her abandonment during your illness, but judges are rarely sympathetic to husbands, especially in cases involving," he glanced at Eliza, "inappropriate attachments. So I'll lose." "You'll lose most of it. The primary estate will stay with the title, but she'll get the London house, significant funds, possibly half your liquid assets. Your sons will likely side with her, which means your heir controls your legacy." Green set down his pen. "By the time this is finished, you'll have your mother's trust and whatever dignity you can salvage, that's all." The words landed like punches. Alistair was quiet for a long moment. "How long will it take?" "A year, maybe 18 months. Parliament has to approve it. There'll be hearings, testimony, public spectacle, every detail of your private life examined, every mistake exposed." Green's voice softened. "Your Grace, I've known you since you were a boy. Your mother trusted me. So I'm going to say this once. You can still walk away. Go home, reconcile with your wife, bury this whole mess. No one would blame you. I would blame me. Is she worth it?" Green looked at Eliza. "No offense, Miss Rowan, but is any woman worth this?" Eliza expected Alistair to defend her, to make grand declarations. Instead, he just said, "Yes." Simple. Final. Green sighed. "Then we'll begin. I'll need documentation, marriage records, financial statements, witness testimony, and you'll need somewhere to stay, somewhere discreet." "We have a hotel." "Not good enough. If your wife's people find you before the papers are filed, they could force a reconciliation. Or worse." He thought for a moment. "I have a cottage, outside the city, in Hampstead, small, private. You can stay there while we prepare the case." "Bartholomew, I can't ask." "You're not asking, I'm offering." Green stood. "Give me 3 days to file the initial petition. Stay out of sight until then. Once it's official, there's nothing they can do except fight it out in court." Alistair shook his hand. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This is going to get much worse before it gets better." The cottage was tiny, 2 rooms, a kitchen, and a view of overgrown gardens. But it was private, hidden behind tall hedges, accessible only by a narrow lane. Perfect for hiding. They settled in awkwardly. Eliza cleaned while Alistair paced, unable to sit still. By the second day, they'd established a fragile routine. She cooked simple meals with supplies Green had stocked. He read old newspapers. Both of them avoided talking about what came next. On the third night, Eliza found him outside, sitting on the steps, staring at nothing. She sat beside him. "You're thinking too much." "Probably." "Regretting?" "No." He looked at her. "Terrified of what I've dragged you into, but not regretting. I made my own choice." "Did you? Or did I steamroll you into something impossible?" Eliza pulled her shawl tighter against the evening chill. "You want honesty?" "Always. I think we're both idiots. I think this is going to be harder than either of us imagined. I think there's a very real chance we'll destroy each other before this is over." She paused. "But I also think I've never felt more alive than I do right now. Even scared, even uncertain. I'd rather be here with you than safe and invisible back where I started." He took her hand. "I don't deserve you." "Probably not." Ish. She smiled. "But you're stuck with me anyway." He kissed her then. Slow, careful, like they had all the time in the world instead of disaster breathing down their necks. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "What happens when it's over? When the divorce is final and we're legally free?" "I don't know. I want to marry you, properly." "I know. Does that scare you?" "Everything about this scares me." She pulled back to look at him. "But yes, say it anyway. When this is over, when I'm free, will you marry me?" It should have felt romantic. Instead, it felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. "Ask me again when we've survived," she said quietly. "When we know what's left of us." "That's not a no. It's not a yes either." He smiled despite everything. "I'll take it." The petition was filed on the fourth day. Green arrived at the cottage with the news and a stack of newspapers. "It started," he said grimly, spreading them across the kitchen table. The headlines were brutal. "Duke abandons wife for servant girl." "Vain family in crisis, scandal rocks, peerage, inappropriate attachment destroys noble marriage." Eliza read them with growing horror. The stories painted her as a scheming opportunist who'd seduced a vulnerable man, painted Alistair as a fool, possibly insane, definitely ruined. "They're destroying us," she whispered. "They're trying to," Green corrected. "But public opinion isn't the battle we need to win. The legal case is what matters." "What about court of public opinion?" Alistair asked. "If everyone believes we're villains, then we change the narrative." Green pulled out a blank sheet of paper. "We give them a different story, one that's harder to dismiss." Over the next week, they crafted their defense. Not through lawyers and courtrooms, not yet, but through carefully placed articles in sympathetic newspapers. Stories about a duke who nearly died, abandoned by his family, about a servant who stayed when everyone else fled, about courage, an unexpected connection and love that defied convention. Green had contacts, journalists who owed him favors, editors who liked controversy. Slowly, a counter-narrative began to emerge. It wasn't much. For every article defending them, 3 more condemned. But it was something. The turning point came 2 weeks later. Eliza was at the market, her first venture out in days, when she overheard 2 women talking. "Heard the whole family left him to die." "Nonsense, that's just what they're claiming. But Martha's cousin works for the Pembrokes, and she says it's true." Says the Duchess locked herself away, wouldn't even go near his sick room. "Well, if that's true, can you blame the man? I'd choose someone loyal too." Eliza stood frozen, holding a bag of apples, hardly daring to breathe. People were talking, and some of them, not many, but some, were questioning the official story. She hurried back to the cottage and told Alistair. "It's working," she said, breathless. "Slowly, but it's working. People are starting to wonder." He looked up from the letter he'd been writing. "Wonder isn't enough. We need proof. Evidence that Catherine abandoned me, that my family fled. Something undeniable. The household staff would know. They were there. None of them will testify. Catherine's already ensured that, bought their silence or threatened them into it. Not all of them." Eliza sat down. "Mrs. Hewitt didn't leave. She stayed, kept the house running, and she documented everything. She always does. If we could get her records, she'd never betray the family. Maybe not the family, but she might testify for the truth. Eliza leaned forward. She's not cruel, just practical. If we approached her right, explained what's at stake, it's too dangerous. If Catherine finds out we've contacted staff, then we don't contact her officially. We write a private letter, appeal to her sense of fairness. Alistair considered. It's risky. Everything we're doing is risky. He smiled slightly. Fair point. They spent the evening crafting the letter, careful, respectful, honest, explaining their position, asking, not demanding, promising protection if she agreed to help. Green delivered it personally, using back channels that couldn't be traced. Then they waited. 3 days passed. 5. A week, Eliza started to lose hope. Then, on the 9th day, a response arrived. Mrs. Hewitt's handwriting was precise as always. The letter was short. I kept records of those 9 days. Who stayed, who left, when, and why. I did it because it seemed important at the time, though I didn't know why. Perhaps this is why. I've enclosed copies. Use them as you see fit. But know this. I'm not doing this for you, Your Grace. I'm doing it because that girl saved your life when no one else would. That matters. Good luck to you both. Attached were detailed logs. Dates, times, names, documentation of every servant who fled, every family member who retreated. Catherine's exact words when she locked herself away. The son's departure, everything. Alistair stared at the pages with something like wonder. She gave us everything. She gave us a chance, Eliza corrected. Now we have to use it. Green took the documentation and filed supplemental motions. More articles appeared. These ones citing specific evidence, naming names, making the abandonment impossible to deny. The narrative began to shift, slowly, painfully. But shift it did. Letters started arriving at Green's office, some condemning, some supporting. One from a baroness who'd lost her husband to illness and understood the horror of being abandoned in crisis. Another from a reform-minded earl who'd always thought divorce laws too restrictive. Small voices, but growing louder. The real test came 6 weeks after the petition was filed. Catherine's solicitors requested a preliminary hearing, a chance to argue the case should be dismissed outright. Green warned them it would be brutal. She'll attack everything, your character, your sanity, Miss Rowan's morals, nothing will be off limits. Can we win? Alistair asked. We can survive. That's all I can promise. They arrived at the courthouse on a gray morning, rain threatening. A crowd had gathered outside, spectators drawn by scandal, journalists hungry for headlines. Eliza kept her head down, but she felt their stares like brands. Inside, the courtroom was smaller than she'd expected, wood-paneled, austere. Catherine sat on the opposite side with her solicitors, flanked by both sons. She looked immaculate, perfectly dressed, perfectly composed. The wronged wife. She didn't look at them. The magistrate entered and everyone rose. He was an older man, stern-faced, clearly annoyed by the spectacle. Be seated. This is a preliminary hearing to determine whether the petition for divorce has sufficient merit to proceed. I'll hear arguments from both sides, then make my determination. Keep it brief. Catherine's lead solicitor stood, a silver-haired man named Pembroke, notorious for destroying opponents. Your Honor, this case is a farce. The petitioner, Duke Alistair Vane, seeks to dissolve a 23-year marriage on the flimsiest of pretexts. He claims abandonment, yet it was he who left his wife and home for a... He glanced at Eliza with undisguised contempt. A servant girl young enough to be his daughter. This isn't divorce, it's midlife delusion enabled by an opportunistic woman who saw a chance to climb above her station. Eliza's hands clenched. Alistair's jaw tightened. Pembroke continued. We have testimony from staff that Miss Rowan deliberately isolated the Duke during his illness, that she encouraged his dependency, that she took advantage of his vulnerable state to establish an inappropriate intimacy. That's a lie, Eliza said before she could stop herself. The magistrate's gaze snapped to her. Young lady, you will remain silent unless addressed. Apologies, Your Honor. She forced herself to sit back, shaking. Alistair squeezed her hand under the table. Pembroke looked pleased. As you can see, Miss Rowan has a certain difficulty with authority. She makes decisions impulsively, without regard for propriety. The Duke, recovering from a severe illness, became infatuated with his nurse, a common phenomenon, well documented. His judgment was compromised. This petition should be dismissed so he can recover fully and reconcile with his true wife. He sat down satisfied. Green stood. He looked smaller than Pembroke, older, less impressive. But when he spoke, his voice carried. Your Honor, my learned colleague would have you believe this is a simple case of illness-induced delusion. It's not. This is a case about abandonment, about a family that fled when their patriarch needed them most, and about the consequences of that choice. He presented Mrs. Hewitt's documentation, walked through it methodically. Who left? When? Why? Catherine's refusal to approach her husband's sick room. The son's immediate departure. One person stayed, Green said quietly, not out of duty or obligation, but out of basic human compassion. Miss Rowan saved the Duke's life. That is not opportunism. That is courage. Courage doesn't excuse impropriety, Pembroke interjected. No, Green agreed, but neither does propriety excuse cruelty. The Duchess abandoned her husband to die. When he survived, thanks to Miss Rowan, she attempted to cover that abandonment by attacking the woman who saved him. This petition isn't about delusion. It's about a man choosing integrity over convenience. The magistrate listened, expression unreadable. When Green sat, he was silent for a long moment. I'll take this under advisement. Decision in 1 week. The hearing ended. They filed out separately. Catherine's party through one door, Alistair and Eliza through another. Outside, the rain had started. Eliza pulled her cloak tight, hardly seeing where they were going. Green guided them to a waiting carriage. How bad was it? Alistair asked once they were inside. Could have been worse, Green said. Could have been better. The judge is conservative. He won't like divorce on principle. But he's also fair. If he believes the abandonment claim, then we have a chance. A chance. That's all. The week that followed was agony. Eliza couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. She paced the cottage like a caged animal, running through the hearing in her mind, imagining every way it could go wrong. Alistair wasn't much better. He tried to stay calm, but she saw the fear in his eyes, saw him writing letters he never sent, starting conversations he couldn't finish. On the 6th night, she found him in the garden again, staring at the stars. Whatever happens tomorrow, she started. Don't, he interrupted. Don't say goodbye, not yet. I wasn't going to. She sat beside him. I was going to say thank you. For what? Dragging you into this nightmare? For seeing me, for choosing me when no one ever has before. She took his hand. Whatever the judge decides, that doesn't change. He pulled her close. She let herself lean into him, borrowing his warmth, his certainty. I love you, he said quietly, in case I haven't said it enough. You haven't said it at all. Then I'm saying it now. I love you, Eliza Rowan. Have since the moment you refused to let me die. She kissed him. Slow. Sure. I love you too, she whispered against his mouth. Even though you're absolutely insane. Especially because I'm insane. They stayed there until the stars faded and dawn crept in. The decision came at noon. They gathered in the same courtroom, smaller crowd this time, but still too many people. The magistrate entered looking tired. I've reviewed the evidence and arguments. This is an unusual case, unprecedented in some ways. He paused. The law requires clear grounds for divorce: adultery, cruelty, or desertion. The respondent claims adultery. The petitioner claims desertion. Eliza held her breath. Based on the documentation provided, specifically the household records kept by Mrs. Hewitt, I find credible evidence of abandonment during a medical crisis. While this does not constitute legal desertion in the traditional sense, it demonstrates a fundamental breach of marital duty. Catherine's face went white. However, the magistrate continued, I also find evidence of inappropriate conduct between the petitioner and Miss Rowan prior to any formal separation. This complicates matters. Eliza's heart sank. Therefore, I am making the following ruling. The petition may proceed to Parliament for full review. I will not dismiss it outright. However, I'm also not endorsing it. Parliament will make the final determination based on complete testimony and evidence. He banged his gavel. This hearing is concluded. It wasn't a win. But it wasn't a loss either. They'd survived. Outside, Green was cautiously optimistic. He could have dismissed it entirely. The fact that he's letting it proceed, that's significant. We have a real case. How long until Parliament reviews it? Alistair asked. 4 months, maybe 6. 4 to 6 more months of uncertainty, of hiding, of waiting. But Eliza looked at Alistair and saw something she hadn't seen before. Hope. We can do this, she said. We can try. They returned to the cottage as rain began falling. Inside, Eliza lit the fire while Alistair read through Green's notes. There'll be more hearings, he said. More testimony. They'll call servants, family members, try to prove we were having an affair long before I left. Were we? Eliza asked quietly. He looked up. No, but we were heading there, and they'll use that. So we tell the truth. Exactly what happened, when, why. The truth might not be enough. Then we make it enough. She crossed to him. We've come this far. I'm not giving up now. He stood, pulling her close. Neither am I. That night, they didn't talk about what came next, didn't plan or strategize or worry. They just held each other and let themselves breathe. The fight wasn't over, wasn't even close. But for the first time since running into the night, Eliza felt like they might actually survive this, might actually win. And that small, fragile hope was enough to keep going. The months that followed tested them in ways neither had anticipated. Not through grand dramatic battles, though those came too, but through the slow, grinding wear of waiting, of living in limbo while lawyers argued and society judged and the future hung suspended like a sword overhead. Eliza learned to live with fear as a constant companion, learned to ignore the stares when she ventured out, the whispers that followed her through markets, learned to sleep despite nightmares of courtrooms and condemnation. Alistair learned something harder, helplessness. For a man who'd spent his life commanding, deciding, controlling, sitting idle while others determined his fate was torture. He paced, wrote letters that went nowhere, snapped at Green over delays, then apologized. But they learned together, too. Learned each other's rhythms, when to push, when to retreat, when silence was comfort, and when it was poison. They weren't graceful about it. Fought sometimes, sharp and ugly, about things that didn't matter because the things that did were too frightening to face directly. But they stayed. 3 months in, Green brought news that shifted everything. Lady Catherine wants to negotiate. They were in the cottage parlor, rain drumming against windows. Alistair looked up sharply from the book he wasn't reading. Negotiate what? A settlement. She'll agree to the divorce if you meet certain conditions. Green set down his briefcase. She wants the London house, 70% of liquid assets, and a formal statement that the marriage ended due to irreconcilable differences, no fault assigned to either party. Meaning she gets to save face while taking everything, Eliza said. Essentially, yes. Alistair stood, restless energy crackling off him. What about the abandonment evidence? The testimony? She wants it buried. Sealed records, no public testimony. In exchange, she won't contest the divorce or pursue damages for adultery. So she wins. She compromises, Green corrected. This isn't victory for her, it's damage control. The scandal has hurt her reputation too. People are talking, questioning. A prolonged battle helps no one. Except the truth, Alistair said quietly. The truth, Green said carefully, is that you want to be free to marry Miss Rowan. This gets you there. Quickly. Quietly. With enough funds remaining to start a new life. Eliza watched Alistair's face. Saw the war there, between vindication and pragmatism, between making Catherine pay and simply being done. What do you think? He asked her. I think I don't want to spend the next year in courtrooms being called a whore. The word came out flat, matter of fact. I think if she's willing to let you go, we should let her. Even if it means she escapes consequences. She hasn't escaped anything. Her marriage is over. Her sons barely speak to her. Society's already whispering. Eliza moved to stand beside him. Taking everything she has left won't undo what she did. It'll just make us as bitter as she is. Green nodded approvingly. Miss Rowan makes an excellent point. Alistair looked between them. You're both certain? I'm practical, Green said, and she's wise. That's better than certain. Fine. Alistair exhaled slowly. Accept the terms. Let's end this. The settlement was finalized within 6 weeks, signed, sealed, filed with Parliament. The marriage was declared dissolved by mutual consent, clinical, bloodless, like it had never been anything more than a business arrangement, which, Eliza supposed, maybe it hadn't. Catherine kept her dignity and most of the money. Alistair kept his title and his freedom. Everyone got what they needed, if not what they wanted. On the day the decree became final, Eliza and Alistair stood in Green's office while the solicitor handed over the documents. "Congratulations," Green said, you're officially unmarried." Alistair stared at the papers. "It feels anticlimactic." "Most legal victories do." Green pulled out another document. "Now, about the other matter we discussed." "Already?" Alistair looked up. "You said it would take time. I expedited things. Called in favors." Green slid the paper across. "A special license. Valid immediately. All you need is a willing bride and a witness." Eliza's breath caught. Alistair turned to her. "Is that a proposal?" "It's an option," Green said. "One I suggest you take before anyone changes their mind about any of this." "Eliza," Alistair's voice softened. "I know I asked before. But that was theoretical. This is real. So I'm asking again, properly this time." He took her hands. "Will you marry me? Knowing exactly what it costs, what we're walking into, what we've already survived." She should have been prepared, had known this was coming. But standing there with his hands warm in hers and the license real and tangible on the desk, the weight of it hit her fresh. This was it, the point of no return. Say yes, and she became a duchess. Say yes, and she stepped into a world that would never fully accept her. Say yes, and she bound herself to a man who'd already lost nearly everything for her. Say no, and she walked away from the only person who'd ever chosen her first. "Yes," she whispered. "Of course, yes." His smile could have lit the whole city. They married 3 days later in a small chapel in Marylebone, Green as witness, the priest barely awake for the early morning ceremony. No guests, no flowers, no fanfare. Just vows spoken quiet and sure in dawn light. Eliza wore the same dress she'd fled Vane Manor in, cleaned and mended. Alistair wore a simple suit, no ducal finery. They looked like ordinary people making ordinary promises. But when the priest said, "You may kiss your bride," and Alistair pulled her close, there was nothing ordinary about it. This was defiance made sacred, love built from ruins. Afterward, they walked through London's waking streets, hand in hand, not hiding anymore. "How does it feel?" Alistair asked. "Being a duchess?" "Terrifying." She squeezed his hand. "Ask me again in a year." "Still think we're idiots?" "Absolutely, but we're married idiots now. That's different." He laughed, genuinely, freely, and she realized she hadn't heard that sound in months, realized how much the fight had cost him, cost them both. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now?" He considered. "Now we figure out how to actually live. Not survive, not fight, just live." It sounded impossible. It sounded perfect. They started small. Rented a modest house in Hampstead, nothing like Vane Manor, but comfortable. Big enough for 2 people learning to be married, small enough to manage without an army of servants. Alistair hired a housekeeper and a cook. Eliza insisted on doing most of the work herself anyway. "I don't know how to just sit idle," she admitted, scrubbing floors that didn't need scrubbing. "Then don't. But maybe stop working yourself to exhaustion trying to prove you deserve to be here." He took the brush from her hands. "You're my wife, not my maid. I know the difference." "Do you?" He pulled her up gently. "Because you still act like you're waiting for someone to tell you to leave." She wanted to argue, couldn't, because he was right. Learning to be a duchess, or rather, learning to be herself while technically being a duchess, was harder than fighting for the title. People didn't know what to make of her. Society invitations didn't come. Former friends of Alistair's either cut him entirely or maintained polite distance. But slowly, a different circle emerged. The reform-minded Earl, who'd written in support, reached out, invited them to a dinner with other progressive thinkers. Eliza spent the entire evening terrified she'd used the wrong fork. Instead, she ended up in a passionate debate about labor conditions with a baroness who ran factories. "You have actual experience," the woman said, delighted. Most of us just theorize. So tell me, what would actually help working women? Eliza told her, bluntly. About wages and hours and the humiliations built into service work. About girls like her who had no path forward no matter how smart or capable. The Baroness listened, took notes, invited her to speak at a Reform Society meeting. I can't do that, Eliza protested later to Alistair. Public speaking? About workers' rights? I'll be laughed out of the room. Or you'll change minds. He looked proud. You've already done the impossible. This is just the next step. The meeting was small, 30 people in a cramped hall, mostly reformers and radicals. Eliza's hands shook as she stood to speak, but once she started, the words came. She told them about the night the Duke fell ill, about the choice she'd made and why, about the servants who fled and the family that abandoned and the brutal calculus of survival when you had nothing. I stayed because I could, she said, because I had just enough courage and just enough stubbornness. But most people in my position don't have that luxury. They can't risk their positions, can't afford to be heroes, and the system punishes them for it. She talked about wages that forced impossible choices, about the lack of legal protections, about how easy it was to be dismissed, ruined, forgotten. When she finished, the room was silent. Then someone started clapping. Then another. Then everyone. The Baroness found her afterward, eyes bright. That was extraordinary. Have you considered writing about this? Writing? Eliza laughed. I barely finished school. You don't need formal education to tell the truth, and people will listen to you. You're living proof that the old order is crumbling. It planted a seed. Over the next months, Eliza started writing, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence. Essays about service work, about class, about the invisible people who kept grand households running. A progressive newspaper published one. Then another. People noticed. Some praised her courage. Others called her a traitor to her class, though they couldn't agree which class that was. Former servants accused her of romanticizing hardship. Aristocrats accused her of ingratitude. She kept writing anyway. Meanwhile, Alistair found his own path. Without an estate to manage, he threw himself into reform work, using his title and remaining influence to push for labor laws, better worker protections. He testified before Parliament, wrote editorials, made himself a nuisance to former friends who wanted things to stay comfortable. You've become radical, one old acquaintance said at a chance meeting. I've become honest, Alistair corrected. Took almost dying to manage it. They worked separately but in tandem, her from the ground up, him from the system down. It was slow, frustrating work. Most days felt like shouting into a void. But gradually, incrementally, things shifted. A factory owner improved conditions after reading one of Eliza's essays. A lord sponsored a bill after Alistair's testimony. Small victories. Barely visible, but real. The real test came 18 months after their marriage. They received an invitation, heavy paper, formal script, to a reception hosted by the Earl of Pemberton, the same Earl who'd been at Catherine's disastrous dinner, who'd witnessed Eliza's humiliation. It's a trap, Eliza said immediately. Probably. Alistair studied the invitation. But it's also a test. Are we going to hide forever? Or face them? Face them in what? Let them tear us apart for entertainment? Or show them we survived? That we're still here, still together, still fighting? He set down the invitation. Your choice. We go, or we don't. But I'm done hiding. Eliza stared at the thick paper, imagined walking into that room, all those faces, all that judgment, imagined being picked apart, whispered about, dismissed, then imagined refusing to go. Imagined letting fear win. We'll need new clothes, she said finally. I'm not facing them in last season's dress. His smile was fierce. That's my Duchess. The reception was exactly as intimidating as she'd feared. Held in Pemberton's London mansion, all crystal and marble and old money. Every important family represented. The room went quiet when they entered. Eliza lifted her chin and walked in like she belonged there. Catherine was there. Of course she was. Standing near the windows with Edward, looking elegant and untouchable. Their eyes met across the room. Catherine's expression flickered. Surprise, resentment, something almost like grudging respect. Then she looked away. Others weren't so subtle. A duchess whispered behind her fan. A lord turned his back. But others, more than Eliza expected, nodded greeting. The reformist baroness swept over immediately. Finally, I was hoping you'd come. There's someone you must meet. The evening passed in a blur of conversations, some hostile, some curious, many awkward. Eliza navigated them carefully, Alistair steady at her side. She didn't win everyone over, didn't expect to, but she held her ground. Near the end of the evening, Pemberton himself approached. Your Grace, Duchess. He nodded to each of them. I'm glad you came. Are you? Alistair's tone was carefully neutral. I am. I was at that dinner, you'll recall, witnessed the whole ugly business. Pemberton paused. I thought at the time it was scandalous, inappropriate, wrong. Eliza braced herself. I've since reconsidered, he continued quietly. What you've both done, the work, the writing, the advocacy, it's been noticed, respected even. You've made something worthwhile from a difficult situation. He looked at Eliza directly. And you, madam, have proven rather more formidable than anyone anticipated. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was acknowledgement. Thank you, Eliza managed. After he left, she turned to Alistair. Did that actually just happen? I think we just got our first real acceptance. Partial, grudging, but real. What does that mean? It means we won. He pulled her close. Maybe not the way we expected, maybe not completely, but we survived. We're here, we're together. That's winning. She kissed him, not caring who watched. Let them stare. They left the reception early, walking home through London streets instead of taking a carriage. The night air was cool, the city settling into its nighttime rhythms. Do you miss it? Eliza asked. The old life, the certainty. Alistair considered. Sometimes. I miss knowing exactly who I was, what was expected, but I don't miss being that person. He squeezed her hand. That man would never have fought for this. Would never have chosen you. Would never have let me choose him, she corrected. That's the part people forget. I chose this too. Best decision I ever made was nearly dying. She laughed. That's terrible. But true. They walked in comfortable silence for a while. Then Eliza said, I'm pregnant. He stopped walking, stared at her. What? Pregnant? I've been trying to figure out how to tell you. Thought maybe during a romantic dinner but apparently I'm doing it in the middle of the street at midnight. She was babbling now. Are you angry? I know we didn't plan. He kissed her, hard and sudden and full of joy. Angry? He said when they broke apart. Eliza, He stopped, seeming to search for words. I'm terrified and thrilled and completely unprepared. When? 5 months, I think. Maybe 6. A baby. He said it like he was testing the word. Our baby. Half Duke, half Maid. Society won't know what to do with them. Then they'll be perfect. He pulled her close, one hand settling protectively over her still flat stomach, like their mother. The pregnancy was hard, not physically, though that was challenging enough, but emotionally. Eliza carried the weight of knowing this child would be judged before they were born. Examined, criticized, used as evidence either for or against everything she and Alistair had fought for. What if they hate us, she asked one night, lying in bed with Alistair's hand on her growing belly, for making their life harder than it needed to be. Then we'll explain that we chose love over ease, chose each other over comfort, and hope they understand. What if they don't? Then we'll love them anyway. Isn't that what parents do? The baby, a girl, was born on a cold January morning. Small, screaming, perfect. They named her Margaret after Alistair's mother, called her Maggie. She had Eliza's eyes and Alistair's stubborn chin, and from the moment she entered the world, she was fiercely, completely loved. Society didn't know what to make of her. The Duke of Vane's daughter by his second wife, the former servant. Some doors stayed closed, but others opened. Reformist families welcomed them, progressive circles embraced them, working people saw them as proof that change was possible. Maggie grew up between worlds, belonging fully to neither, but comfortable in both. At 3, she could recite poetry with aristocratic children and play with servants' kids without hesitation. At 5, she announced she wanted to be a doctor. Girls can't be doctors, someone told her. Mama says people used to think servants couldn't be duchesses, and she is one, so I can be a doctor. Eliza and Alistair exchanged glances over her head. Their daughter had inherited their stubbornness. Yes, Eliza said firmly. You can be whatever you choose. The years passed, not easily, not smoothly, but forward. Eliza continued writing, her essays collected into a book that sold surprisingly well. She spoke at universities, helped establish schools for working children, became, impossibly, someone people listened to. Alistair pushed through incremental reforms. Not as many as he wanted, slower than he hoped, but real changes that improved real lives. Together, they built something neither could have built alone. A partnership, a family, a life that defied every rule they'd been taught. On their 10th anniversary, they returned to Hampstead Cottage, now kept as a retreat, a reminder. They stood in the garden where they'd weathered those early frightening days. Do you regret it? Alistair asked. Any of it? Eliza thought about the cost. The fights, the fear, the years of uncertainty, thought about everything they'd lost and everything they'd gained. Not for a second, she said. Liar. But he smiled. I regret some of it. Hurting my sons, even though they've since come around. The public fights, how hard it was on you those first years. But not marrying me. Never that. He pulled her close. That's the one thing I got completely right. Maggie ran into the garden then, 10 years old, grass-stained, laughing, followed by the housekeeper's son and a neighbor girl. 3 children who would never understand why their friendship was remarkable. To them, it was just normal. Maybe that was the real victory, not changing everyone's minds, but raising a child who didn't see the barriers that had defined their parents' lives. That night, after Maggie was asleep, Eliza and Alistair sat in their study. He was reading proposed legislation. She was drafting an essay. Ordinary married life, doing ordinary married work. Do you think we changed anything? She asked. Really changed it, I mean. Or did we just carve out one small exception for ourselves? Alistair set down his papers. I think we proved it's possible, that the old rules aren't inevitable, that courage and stubbornness and refusing to accept the world as it is can actually shift things. He paused. Will that change everything overnight? No, but it plants seeds and eventually seeds grow. That's very optimistic for you. I married a servant and became a better person. I'm allowed some optimism. She threw a cushion at him. He caught it, laughing. Later, lying in bed, Eliza thought about that terrifying night she'd run from Vane Manor. How impossible everything had seemed. How certain she'd been that choosing him meant choosing destruction. She hadn't been entirely wrong. Parts of them had been destroyed, old certainties, comfortable lies, the people they'd been. But what they'd built from those ruins was stronger, truer, real. I love you, she said into the darkness. I love you too, Alistair answered, though I still think we're both idiots. The very best kind. They fell asleep tangled together, no longer afraid of tomorrow, no longer certain of anything except this. They'd chosen each other when the world said they shouldn't. And they'd do it again, every time. The end and the beginning of everything that mattered. Years later, when Maggie was grown and fighting her own battles for change, she asked her mother about those early days. Were you scared? Terrified, Eliza admitted, every single day. But you did it anyway. We did it anyway, she corrected. Your father and I together, that's the secret. You don't face impossible things alone. What if I can't find someone to face impossible things with? Eliza smiled. Then you face them anyway, and trust that somewhere along the way you'll find your people, the ones brave enough or crazy enough to stand with you. Is that what Papa was? Brave or crazy? Both, definitely both. Maggie laughed. Then, more seriously, do you think it was worth it? Everything you gave up? Eliza looked around the room. Modest by ducal standards, rich by any other measure, filled with books and papers and evidence of lives fully lived, filled with love. Every sacrifice, every fight, every terrifying moment. She took her daughter's hand. Worth it, all of it. And she meant it, because in the end, the woman who'd been invisible had become impossible to ignore. The man who'd ruled by title learned to lead by example. And together, they'd proven that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to accept the world as it is. Refuse to walk away. Refuse to stay silent. Refuse to be anything less than completely, impossibly, stubbornly yourself. Even when, especially when, the world says you shouldn't. That was their legacy. Not a grand estate or a spotless reputation, but proof that courage and love could reshape everything, one impossible choice at a time.